paradigm of husbandhood and fatherhood, the modern paradigm is very helpful. Is it helping anyone? Is it doing anything? Is it just a neutral paradigm, And then the other thing is just like its value, which I think is directly related, but husbandhood, fatherhood, what's its value rank in society today? And if I had to guess, it's just really low. But I'll bet in the reality of things, it is top 1 or 2 or something like that, So it's just the disparities.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not going to have the right statistics, but lots of people do if they're interested in looking it up. The statistics suggest that fatherhood is very important in a lot of different aspects of society, but you don't see that import reflected in society. And there's lots of ways that people like to point it out, right? Like Homer Simpson's the dumb dad that represents every dumb dad in America. And I think there's a lot of truth to how people analyze that situation and a lot of reasons why, whether it's like some feminist movement or feminist agenda or whatever. But yeah, I think that plays into what you and I were talking about with how do you get young men excited about fatherhood? Because there's been an agenda pushed for a while now that the most important thing to a young woman should be and often is their career. So if you say to a young woman, like, what are you excited about in your future? She'll talk about her career a lot of times. Like, yes, and this is the average woman. I'm not trying to stereotype anybody, but the average, especially if they've been taught this, will say, yeah, I'm gonna go into nursing, law school, whatever it is, and they're excited about something. But what is it about a young man that can get him excited about his future? And I think it'd be really cool if it was fatherhood and husbandhood, but I don't know what it is. I don't know if anything excites young men anymore. even career. Like there's a lot of young men that I know that don't even bother with getting a driver's license because they just can't figure out how to get excited about anything.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I think about is what would be the program that would get young men excited about becoming men and taking on responsibility. And Peterson's done a great job of trying to solve that problem. I have seen other programs. I think my phone, has been listening because since you and I started talking about it, it's been feeding me a lot more stuff like that. So I've seen Peterson has a parenting class. It's not father specific, but it's parenting. And I'll bet that's an amazing thing. And then I've seen a couple other guys that have like some kind, I haven't even watched these little commercial videos, but I've seen them enough to get the vibe where basically it's like some guy dismounts his dirt bike or his horse or whatever and looks into the camera and he's like, if you're a weak beta male, you better skip this advertisement, not for you. And then he goes into like whatever his little sales pitch is. And that's great for guys that are looking for an adventure. But what guys are looking for an adventure? Like what young men are getting excited and why? And then those are the people that I'd want to talk to and be like, how do we get your generation excited about the most amazing thing that you'll ever do that we're really not talking about very well?
Yeah. And this is, I think, speaks to, when I say paradigm, I think it's that same thing. I think you say, what can we do to help people be excited about it? And I think I need help being excited about it too, is what is the paradigm? Like, what's the thing? Like, what's the story of husbandhood and fatherhood that should be so attractive? What is the reality about it that should be so enticing? And it would probably be worth just sitting down and writing out 10 pages to answer that question myself. Because I can't answer it so well. I feel like I can give you logical answers though. Like it seems like I was thinking about this earlier today. Like if you were going to dedicate your life to something that had the greatest impact on society in general and just going in a prosperous and a peaceful direction going forward, I wouldn't be surprised if a God could answer that question. You might say, yeah, it's husbandhood, fatherhood, and teaching. those are the things that came to my mind. Is like those are the things that are going to like when you die, it's going to be what are the principles instilled in the people that you left behind. Like, and
Yeah.
that's going to be the kind of the mini trajectory. I mean, you kind of only have control of your own little world, but um, there are some people that are highly influential that really move the needle on like societal level.
That influence, I think, a lot of times is seen as the currency, the money that someone has, is the power that they have to influence society. But it's funny, I was just thinking about this, how someone like Joe Rogan, who has the power to influence and does influence, will be forgotten in 100 years. Nobody will know his name except for his family, and his ideas will have had some impact. But it's not like he has one idea that's really strong. He has a million ideas that are like, okay, yeah, it's kind of cool. And then as a father, it's like you can't compare to that. I'll see if I can find a good analogy. But as a father, your impact is not seeing how many people you can get your ideas across, because it thins out your ideas if you do that. You're spreading it thin. But it's more like trying to copy everything good about you into one person really effectively. And so your ability to reproduce your goodness is way better than something like a podcaster. But you're only able to do it for one person, two people, maybe a few more than that. But it's a copy. And so that's one thing that I think fatherhood produces, is your ability to affect one person that then turns into a generation, and then their kids, and there's like this cascading effect where you're affecting way more people than a Joe Rogan would, but the time that you're doing it is incomparable, because Joe Rogan has an infinite amount of effect for 10 years and then zero. I have an infinitely small amount of effect, but over the course of 100 years, I mean, how long is my effect going to last? 200 years, 500 years? I mean, if you talk about the ancient people, some of those people have had good, strong effects in cultures for thousands of years. So I wonder if there's something like that to offer to young men. But again, for a young man to be excited about that, they have to be convinced that they have something to offer, right? Something that they are going to transmit that's going to be valuable.
Yeah. Maybe that's the thing for the average man, is that they're not excited, or they don't know what that they can transmit that is valuable. But I like the analogy. Yeah, I
They're
mean,
not
sure.
they're not excited about what they are, who they are. So then why would they be excited about retransmitting that to another life? I'll bet that has a lot to do with it. Like the self-worth, the average self-worth of the male group is low enough that reproduction is just not enticing. It'd be more like, annihilation is more tempting when you feel like you're a burden and you're not contributing, right? Why would you want to reproduce dependency? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm 100%. I mean, on my most depressed days, I don't exactly want to go propagate myself anywhere. So it makes a lot of sense to me that you
Yeah, I want
only
to be
you
cloned.
yeah, I mean, I think it's true that you only want to clone yourself on your best days.
Yeah, yeah. I want to be cloned on my best day, not my worst day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the thoughts that I struggle with trying to figure out how to communicate. So, one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Captain Hook, where he says, "Death is the only adventure." And for some reason, it resonates with me. And fatherhood's kind of the same thing, where I think fatherhood and husbandhood is the only adventure. But then you try and communicate why, and it doesn't sound like an adventure, just like death doesn't sound like an adventure. So, fatherhood is the only real adventure. Everything else is weak and selfish. And then we were talking about that one Sir Ernest Shackleton, who's a guy who went to the North Pole, I think, and he put out an advertisement for people to join him. And he basically said in his advertisement, if you have free time, we'd love to have you. We pay really good, and it's going to be an awesome trip. It's going to be so much fun. And really nobody showed up to help him. He resubmits his advertisement in the opposite direction, and he says, I'm looking for the strongest men that are willing to take week pay for adventure and be able to, have the time of their lives, risking everything for nothing. And like all of a sudden, he gets a lot of men showing up to go on this adventure. And I think fatherhood needs to be presented that way because it is that way. Like if you tell guys like, hey, it's going to be nice and fun, like we'll just have kids, it'll be great, it's all barbecues and stuff, I don't think they'll show up. I don't think they'll be excited about that.
Yeah.
There's nothing for them to contribute to. And then the last part that I have a hard time communicating is the what else question, which is if you're not going to be excited about fatherhood, fine. What are you excited about? Like, what else could there possibly be to be excited about? And then people will throw out all this stuff, hobbies, adventures, whether it's career, some kind of exciting adrenaline sport, or girls, or traveling the world and all this stuff. And those things never clicked to me. And so when people would say those things and I hear people promoting those things, I'm in my mind, I'm like, that's so weak. It's such a weak thing to say. And I don't know how to communicate to them that everything you're talking about could be taken from you in an instant. But if you have a child, and let's say you don't even have that child for very long, for whatever reason, that stays with you forever. Like there's no forgetting or getting away from that experience, that responsibility, those questions. But you could have the time of your life for a decade, and then all of a sudden it can just all be taken away from you, and it's all memories, and it's down the toilet, and nobody cares, and so it's amazing to me that people try and compare those things, and I don't know how to counteract that.
Yeah, I mean, to sympathize with some of those people, I think it is definitely possible to be genuinely excited about something that is not fatherhood or husbandhood and is still, good because for whatever reason. But I do, yeah, I agree with you that painting fatherhood and husbandhood, I wonder if, because, fatherhood and husbandhood is not peachy. Like it is incredibly hard. And I wonder if, there's this author I really like. His name's Nassim Taleb, and he wrote like Anti-Fragile and Skin in the Game and Black Swan. And I wonder if there's some correlation with fatherhood and husbandhood being one of the ultimate plays on skin in the game in life. Because once you choose to get married, I mean, yeah, you could just get divorced and try to move on. But when you're in a marriage, it is incredible skin in the game. Like you are tied, man. Like there's nothing, there's nothing loose about it unless you start, messing around. But fatherhood's the same thing. As soon as you choose to have one child, you could choose to walk away. You could choose so many things. But the skin in the game on that decision, I'll bet, for those who choose to walk away, hangs with them forever. That's my guess. But if you stay in the game, then it's the ultimate play on skin in the game in life. Because yeah, I mean, you can play a lot of other games. You can try to get super fit. You can try to get a ton of money, have a nice house, and travel the world. When it comes to life, I don't know how skin in the game those things are.
Right. That's a super interesting way to look at it. I was thinking that was a different conversation, a parallel conversation where we talk about how, fatherhood and husbandhood actually is quite dangerous for a man to get into. Like there's a lot of risk there. And I get that. I've been on that side of the page. I understand. And at the same time, it's like, what else are you going to do with your life? But the skin in the game. So if you have someone who wants something to be committed to, then it seems like marriage, fatherhood is going to be an obvious choice. And that's one of the reasons why men steer away from it, because they don't want to be committed. And so you get this weird dynamic where you've got guys roaming around that have chosen not to commit to anything, and that they're still looking for purpose. So how does commitment tie to purpose? Because that's what I find. I find that there's a bunch of men that are struggling to find purpose in their life. And now I'm wondering if it's because they're just not committed to anything, right? They're not committed to their job. They're not committed to their hobbies. They're not committed to themselves, to their routines. But as soon as you're responsible for another life, I remember when I got married, my dad said, the crazy thing about being married is that now she owns you. And I was like, why would you say it? Why would you say it like that? Like, that's an interesting way to say it. And it conveys the perspective that there is a threat there, right? Like she can hurt you. And I hadn't thought about it like that because I was in love. I was excited about marriage. But at the same time, I chose to view it as like, yes, she could hurt me, but she's also in this with me. Like we're a team. We're going to figure this out. And what else could be better than that, than having somebody on your side when bad things happen? Like if I have somebody with me that makes fun of me when I make a mistake, that's not going to work. But I don't have that. I have somebody who encourages me when I make a mistake. And what could possibly be better than that? Yesterday, or a couple of days ago, I was in a work meeting. One of the coworkers just had a baby, or is about to have a baby. And he was like, yeah, this will be number 2 for us. And after that, we're done. And another coworker said, yeah, that's what I thought too, but we ended up having 3. And another coworker chimed in and was like, yeah, I'm having that exact same conversation with my wife right now. Like we have 2, and that's got to be it. That's got to be it. And so I chimed in and I was like, the more the better. Like, what are you guys afraid of? Like, I don't understand. So you've got guys that for some reason have found purpose in committing. But then when it comes to the most fulfilling part of their life, they're actively keeping all of that at a distance. Like, please, not too much commitment, not too much purpose, not too much responsibility, because they're trying to balance this skin in the game threat with the purpose that brings them so much happiness. And in my mind, it's so wild. It's wild that we don't talk about this more and try and figure this out.
Yeah. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into the skin of the game thing, because I think, yeah, it's occurring. I mean, I hadn't thought about that until this call, until in the middle of this call, but I think it might have a big part in it. And if the author was listening to me right now, he would say I'm an idiot because I don't understand it probably. But the whole idea of skin in the game is that you're rewarded proportional to your results. Like, and there's a term for when the inverse is that you're in a situation when the inverse is true. So the classic example is like a salaried employee could kind of get away with not doing a great job actually for a while, but they still get a paycheck all the time, right? So they don't have high skin in the game. Or a politician could completely run, a deficit for a long time and they still get a paycheck for years, right? So like in those examples, they do not have skin in the game. But as soon as you say like, okay, and I believe there's some countries that do this actually. All right, politician, leader, you get paid based on running a surplus and some other things. And it's just proportional. And they know they don't even get a check until they achieve milestones. And, in the business world, Elon Musk is the classic example. I mean, the guy, I think, just understands this principle and absolutely goes all in on what he does. He leaves no room for, he tries to hold as much stock as he can in the companies he's running for skin in the game. And I think the same thing. So anyway, going back to fatherhood and husbandhood, I think when you make the commitment, whether you're pretty naive about the commitment or not, when you make the commitment to get married, I mean, that's a big commitment legally, relationally, in so many ways. It's a huge commitment, and you are now answering to a relationship. Like you are answering to it, and you can't just have fun for a month and then drive to the next state over and do something else. Like you literally can't. Like it is deep skin in the game. And then once you have a child, I don't know, it feels like skin in the game times 10 once you have a child. Because it's like, not only do you have to keep a baby alive now, you are now realizing that they are absorbing all of your beliefs. They are absorbing all of your behaviors. And you are now like ultimate skin in the game on another life, you know? Like it's ultimate. I mean, there's nothing that has made me want to improve more than when I do something really dumb in front of my kids or say something really dumb to them.
Yeah.
And I just go, man, I got to change. Like this is not good, you know? And I think it's because I have skin in the game. I know my relationship with this child is I probably got another 50 years, right? It's a 50-year horizon before I die, probably. And so, anyway, yeah, I think the skin in the game. I'm currently really liking the skin in the game analogy. I think it's helpful for me.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to look at it. So the putting values on your kid, whether you like it or not, is interesting. Like there's one side of this that I'd be interested in exploring. I haven't really thought about it too much, but you choose your friends, you don't choose your family, and the family relationship is so interesting because we feel a connection to those people, even if we don't want to for some reason. And there's tons of examples of this that you can actually watch online in real time. Like there's a really famous one where a guy accidentally finds his parents, and the guy is like 60 years old, so his parents are like in their 80s, and he loses it. He loses it just on hearing that they're alive and that they're like they exist. And he's overcome with emotion before he even talks to him. And so you can imagine when he does talk to him, how crazy that is. Like there's this instant connection, instant bond. I have a friend who has a mother, and she didn't know it, but her mother had been hiding and keeping from her letters from her biological father. And she was under the impression that her biological father had left and was gone and never wanted anything to do with him. Well, somehow she found this out. She's now in her 30s. She just barely found this out not too long ago, because a guy reached out to her and was like, "Hey, I'm your dad." And she was like, "I don't want to hear from you. You abandoned us." And he was like, "No, I didn't. Have you not gotten any of my letters?" Then she goes back to the mom, and the mom was like, "Oh, sorry, I should have told you." And so there's like a crazy drama going on, right? At the same time, she's instantly bonded with her father and still instantly bonded with her mother, who has done some really strange things. So even like, I can't get over that. I can't get over how we, for some reason, have a familial commitment that is like in a different language than our friendship commitments. And in my mind, it reflects the relationship that we have with God, or that we should have with God, where I can meet someone and become their friend, and it will never, over 100 years, it will never develop into the relationship that I have with the father that I just met 10 seconds ago. That to me is wild. And so whatever that is, you map that onto being a father first. Like that relationship is very, like, that's about as family as it gets. And then your spouse, which is your only chosen family. That's the only member of your family that you get to choose. And so that to me is a good way to kind of think about that and try and get a young man to realize what to look forward to in a relationship. Is like, I literally get to pick a new sister, member of my family, and say, "Hey, I'm excited about life. Do you want to join me in this family thing, the family commitment?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's do this." And you're unstoppable. Like, how could you how could you not be excited about that?
Yeah. It would be fascinating to know what the connection is there, because there must be something that we just don't know how to measure yet that would show us why it is that you can have a connection with a father you've known for 10 seconds better than a friend that you've had for a lifetime. Because there's got to be something, like, if there's dimensions we just don't understand. Like, there's got to be
Yeah.
something that connects us to each other that we just don't. There's no instrument. There's no instrument to measure with that, right? But it exists.
I always assumed it was time. Like, you and I have a relationship that's really strong, not because we're family. No. It's because we've spent so much time together. But it doesn't seem to be true, because the
Yeah.
family members who don't spend time together still have that connect. Like, my wife has the same situation with her. She has several family members that she's spent very little time with, but she's super bonded to. And yeah, I don't know what it is. That's why I think it has something to do with God. It's because, like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. And it's a miracle of sorts, and so miracles are usually attributed to God, and I think it's appropriate. I think it's also funny how you can read stories of like great ancestors you have not a chance of meeting. They've been dead for 200 years. You can read a story about them, and you can start pumping your fist, like, yes, this is us, even
Yeah,
though
that's
you're like,
true.
I don't know, I've never met them. There shouldn't be that kind of connection, it seems like, but there is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. If I thought about that, I'm pretty sure I would convince myself that that's evidence of the divine, because I don't think any animals, mammals are going to have any of that kind of sense. They have relationship sense. But I mean, if a mammal has a baby and after a couple weeks you remove the baby, there's no sense that parent has like long-term longing for the baby indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
But I've worked with women that have had abortions decades ago, and it might as well have been yesterday. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love it. I think this is something that is going to be an increasingly popular topic in our culture as we're trying to figure this out. And apparently there are like parenting classes out there, people trying to get young men excited about fatherhood and stuff. Um, but I wonder, what else we can do. It'd be awesome to talk to more young men about how they feel about it, whether they're excited about it or not, and why.
Yeah. There's probably some stats you can find pretty quickly that are not
But yeah,
about our church, but general sentiment among like young 20-year-olds or something. Uh,
yeah. And I've heard some of them. Like, there's stats about sexuality, pornography that are interesting when it comes into that. Video games, employment in young men, even the employment ages. There's studies about that and how boys used to be able to get a job at 8 years old, and that was them starting to become a man. Well, today you can't get a job before the age of 14, so you've now stretched out their becoming a man phase way later. And what does that do to them? Because now they're supposed to be employed for what, 4 years before they leave the house. So it's super super interesting how intricate that problem is. But I think one of the things that helped me that I think could help a lot of young men is if there was, I think you mentioned this too, like a TV show that was a good, entertaining TV show like Seinfeld or Friends or Simpsons or whatever, but it showed how awesome the parenting, fatherhood, and husbandhood situation is. Like, it put that on display as like, yeah, it's not easy, but it is the most amazing thing you'll ever do. Like, it's not even close.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that would go a long ways. So if you know any movie producers,
Yeah. I keep to that, and I think that movie comment ties into this. I keep coming back to the paradigm. So if I had to guess, if you polled 10,000 young men, and the only thing you asked them was to describe the I don't the like the story or the narrative of fatherhood. I don't know what that. If you asked me that before I was 25, I don't know. Well, geez, before I was 30, I don't know. Maybe now, I don't know that I could paint a narrative that was. I mean, it's almost like you want that narrative to read like the greatest adventure book that you could read. And I don't think I would paint. I don't think I would have painted that. And I'll bet at large, the average young male is not like. I assume they're going to say, "Well, fatherhood, it's cool." I'm assuming it's cool because you probably have kids, and you could probably do cool things with the kids, and being married. I could see that being fun because you have a really best friend, right? I could see some very average comments, and I might just be projecting a lot, but I'd be surprised if there was even a small percentage of people that told you something that read like an adventure book, right? That you're like, that's the response, And so I keep coming back to that. Like, I think if your largest lever on this, which is a very hard lever, is developing the narrative and the story, and then getting as big of an audience as you can to listen to that story and narrative. Which a TV show would do that. And I think in a smaller scale form, I think a TV show could do that. But yeah, anyway.
I like it. I'm going to try it real quick.
What are you doing?
Trying to come up with a little script.
Honestly, I think it needs to read like the Ernest Shackleton invitation. I'm really liking this Ernest Shackleton and Skin in the Game vibe because you think about their trip, and I watched a video about their trip a while ago, and it is pure skin in the game. They get on a boat, they're sailing across the ocean when boats were not highly reliable, food was not highly reliable, and so mistakes had massive consequences. And like everybody had to do their part. They had to get in line, they had to define roles and responsibilities. They had to do things to a T. And then they got put in this situation where their ship sinks and they're stranded. I think it's Antarctica. And there's never more skin in the game in that story than in the moment that they're stranded. Now the cool thing about the story is they all make it back alive. It was this insane 2-year arc, and they all make it back alive. And I kind of feel like fatherhood and husbandhood the story can be the same as that one. It's like when you become a husband, your choices matter. There's no better skin in the game. Like what you do today amplifies throughout your life. You stick with a bad habit for 5 years. It's just that has massive effect. Like you're going to feel that in 50 years. It's gonna come back at you. Literally reap what you sow in a stronger way in marriage and in fathering than in anything else you could do. I mean, I could make some pretty big mistakes at the company I work for, and they would fire me, and I would move on, and they would move on and probably be successful, over time.
Or how can you get executed?
Yeah. So, anyway, I really like. I had not thought of it until this conversation. I guess the really specific nature of skin in the game, which is you reap hardcore what you sow in your marriage and in your fatherhood.
It kind of reminds me, speaking of the consequence thing, I have a couple of friends that are from Ukraine and kind of the bloc, and they're like hyper masculine, strong fathers and husbands, right? Well, their stories are insane. Like every story of them, the impact and trauma that they had from growing up is 100% skin in the game. Like their fathers and grandfathers lived on a fine line, and if they messed up, they were executed, and for various reasons. And that's how one of my buddy's dads died, is because he made a mistake, did the wrong thing at work or pissed off the government or taxes or whatever it was. He was executed in his front yard by public officials.
Oh man.
And so if you live like that, like that's just life. Like that's just the culture you live in, is 100% skin in the game. Yeah, I'll bet that polarizes you to like 100% masculinity and 100% femininity. Like you master your domains and then come together as a team, because that's the highest likelihood of surviving, just like in the Shackleton story.
Yeah. Yeah, man, this is inspiring me. This is making me want. This is
So it's
making me
working.
want. It's making me want to cut all ties I have with anything where I don't have skin in the game. Because I do. I feel like I do things. There are plenty of things that I am tied to in which I don't have to reap what I sow. And I can tell you the way I impact and contribute to that thing, I am not as engaged with that as I am with things where it's like where that connection is pure. You reap what you sow. When that's the case, you have my attention, you know. There's no floundering.
I
Um,
was thinking about something like, well, I'll read the Shackleton ad real quick for men. So, men wanted for expedition of a lifetime. This is what the AI did for fatherhood, husbandhood. Married life, long years, no map, daily trials, certain rewards. Early mornings and sleepless nights, messy quarters. Frequent peril from tantrums, finances, and misunderstandings. Complete commitment required, companionship constant, gratitude rare. Moments of wonder and laughter amidst monotony and exhaustion. Possibility of eternal joy for those who endure to the end.
what do you? Does this have a memory on your old chats?
Yeah, it does.
Uh,
Honor, purpose, legacy await the men who dare to call themselves a husband and a father. So
yeah,
I thought
that's the ending it needed. It needed a good because I feel like the Ernest Shackleton ending is well. Anyway, the ending being a description clearly of the reward for those who have the courage, but like a clear description of what that reward is. You know.
that's a good way to put it. What is the reward for fatherhood, husbandhood, for those who have the courage to enter? And it's a purpose-driven life. I mean, it's bizarre to me how I have coworkers that have a resume that can get them to a certain place, and then they talk about fatherhood as if it's like, you know, a house that's too big and they have to clean it more than they
Yeah,
want.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, no, no, no. I don't think you understand. The fatherhood is the resume. Like that is the resume piece that is bringing you to these different places. It's just in the background, like nobody sees it. But the
yeah,
reason I go to work and perform the way I do is because I have a family I'm trying to provide for. And I tell this to guys all the time, especially missionaries and stuff, because they'll talk about school plans after mission, whatever. And I'd be like, your goal to be a father and a husband will drive you to do all of the other stuff. That's all you need to know. Like you'll become whatever you want to become if you prioritize the husband father stuff first, because that will propel you into whatever else
yeah.
you have.
That's that would take quite a strong story. I feel like to give because that story I know. I feel like I can logically say I know what you mean and I would agree. But at the same time, it's not something I operate on. Like I think it would take a strong story again or something to help me realize how that connection really makes sense. But it really is the in the LDS context it makes a lot of sense because you hear similar verbiage with and prioritize God and all else shall be added unto you. It's like it's similar verbiage as that, like prioritize fatherhood and husbandhood, and then you'll figure out your career. Or it's like to a person who hasn't been reading the scriptures, they're going to hear that and go, I don't, I don't know if I'm making this connection.
Yeah, and it's funny too because there's bad examples that are easy to pull out and be like, well, they're poor and miserable because they had kids too early and they
Yeah,
married too
yeah,
young.
right.
And I've seen that and I've thought the same thing, but as I get older, I realize that's actually not true. Those people that you're looking at and you're saying they're poor and miserable, they're actually way better off than they would be if they hadn't committed to that situation. Because a lot of those people would have been the homeless community, except for they got married and they had kids. And so like, okay, I'm going to have to like work a little bit harder to figure this out because I got people who depend on me. Otherwise, what you think they'd be doing better? You think those people
Yeah,
who have like better careers, more committed, more disciplined, happier if they didn't have a wife and kids. And there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, it's very hard for me to convince myself that any father or husband would be better off if they weren't in that situation. And, I've seen a lot of bad situations.
Yeah, I feel like that checks out. And again, like you said, there's exceptions, but there's exceptions everywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would be really hesitant. It would take a lot. It would take a lot for me to see a young man and try and talk him out of a father-husband situation. Like, hey, that's probably not a good idea. That would take a lot for me. Pretty much any situation I could think of that's, at least reasonable, if not, not even good or great, but just reasonable, I'd be like, yeah, man, you should totally do it. Marriage is great. Even if it doesn't work out, it'll be the best growing opportunity you ever had.
Yeah, that is an interesting delineation. I was thinking about this. Are there things, there's no rule book, but are there rules of thumb for maybe when you'd be like, yeah, you shouldn't get married? Is it like when there's hardcore codependence? Is it when there's like
Well, abuse, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the typical response to that.
any form of like abuse slash violence? Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, violence is easy, but abuse, a lot of times these days, people, when they say abuse, are talking about emotional abuse, not physical.
Yeah.
Manipulation tactics, things like that. But here's this is a whole other conversation. But everybody chooses their spouse because their spouse fits their trauma from their childhood. That's like, generally speaking, that's pretty true. You have trauma from your childhood,
Yeah.
and you pick a spouse that mates up with your trauma. That's why you fall in love with them. And then if you're, a healthy person, your spouse is healthy, eventually you figure that out, because the reason you married is a little bit off. Like, you weren't really in love, you were in love with parts of them and you're not in love with other parts of them. And eventually you figure that out. And so you come to realize that if you don't ever get married, you don't ever figure that out, which means you never resolve the childhood trauma. Like, you never have to deal with the things you've been carrying around.
Interesting. So you're using marriage as a pivot point in educating yourself in your own trauma.
Yeah, marriage is the first therapy.
No, this makes sense. I mean, I could see somebody completely neglecting and missing the signals, but it is nonetheless it's probably never stronger signals being sent than when you're in marriage. And
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But like even if there's no abuse that would be categorized by like a clinician or the law or anything like that, even if there's nothing extreme, you still have traumas, and your spouse is still mating to those traumas. It doesn't matter how good a life you had when you were a kid. It doesn't matter how small your traumas are compared to everybody. You still have some trauma, because everybody does, and your spouse is going to mate to those. And so when somebody comes to me and says, I'm thinking about marrying someone, like, what do you think? I'm pretty much always going to default to, yes, marry whoever it is, as long as they're not overtly abusive and violent. Because if you get married, especially if you get married young, you'll quickly start learning the things that you need to learn to become your highest potential. If you avoid marriage for whatever reason, all you're doing is putting off all of those learnings. You're putting off all the time that you need to take to overcome those deficiencies that will get you to your potential.
Yeah, when you're developing a product for a business, one of your key metrics is time to market. But then nested in that is the rate at which you iteratively cycle product development cycles. And I feel like when you get married and you have to walk through the door every day and face each other, you're in a process of development, right? It's like, whereas if you're single, you can just kind of go home and not face anyone. But like when you have to stare somebody else in the face and behave and talk and try to do things, I feel like you're cycling through your iterations way faster. right?
Yeah.
You're just like, so
Yeah. And you have to, if you don't, like, let's say you're in a marriage, but you don't want to change, whatever, and you're more of like a boyfriend girlfriend phase, your product is going to suck. That's why boyfriend girlfriends are such a pain in the butt, because boyfriend girlfriend, there's very little skin in the game. There's very little reason to turn over a prototype. There's very little reason to improve on your product. Yeah,
yeah,
that's fascinating.
that is a fascinating way to think about it. Yeah. You know, and Britt and I were just talking the other day because, you know, she and I got married when we were both 24, and we were talking, and I was like, you know, I am significantly less afraid these days of marriage. Obviously, I'm 37 now and stuff. I was like, I would not be afraid to suggest to my kids to get married as early as they can. Like, you know, not that that is by far not the most important indicator to get married as early as you can, but get like if you can and are able, it is great to get married as early as you can. You know, like I used to be, I think, pretty neutral to that. You know, I was certainly neutral to anybody's situation because you have no idea what's going on in their situation, but I guess neutral towards what I thought about my kids. But I feel like these days, what's up, Cooper? I feel like these days, um, I, I'm like, yeah, I'm not against my kids getting married super young. Like it's not going to be a concern to me. You know?
Yeah, isn't that interesting that we have examples of that in our family of pretty young marriages, 17 years old, 18 years old, and how at the time of them getting married, it was kind of wild. Like, that's pretty young. And then not soon after that, you're kind of like, actually, that kind of worked out pretty well. That made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's wise for everybody to do it that way. But, if you have people surrounding you, a good team, a good family, then what is the risk? Like, there's a lot of advantages to getting married too young. What are the risks to getting married too young? You miss out on a little bit of whatever, a
Yeah.
little bit of school, a little bit of travel. Yeah. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I looked forward to was having kids when I had good energy. So I didn't want to have a child when I'm like 40 years old or 50 years old because, my energy would be lower. And so I really like that. I would imagine having a kid at 18 and 20 would be amazing. Like, it would be, you'd have a best friend within a few years.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah, can you imagine? I mean, I'm 37. I could have had a 20-year-old son or daughter right now. You know, that's crazy. I mean, that's a really useful adult. You know, it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
No,
interesting. Well, I should go. I need to head home.
all right.